There's a specific kind of tired that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got last night. It's the tired that arrives somewhere in your 40s, sometimes your late 30s, that isn't fixed by a good night's rest or a weekend off or a holiday you've been looking forward to for months. You come back from the holiday, and the tired is still there, waiting patiently, like it lives in the house now. You sleep 8 hours and wake up needing coffee before you can think. You finish the workday and there's nothing left. Not for the gym, not for the project you keep meaning to start, not for the conversation that deserves your full attention. You go to bed already tired for tomorrow. This isn't burnout exactly. It isn't depression. It isn't a medical problem your doctor can name and treat. It's something quieter and more pervasive than any of those things. A slow, almost imperceptible dimming of the baseline energy that used to be available before you'd done anything to earn it. The energy you had at 30 that simply existed, requiring no management, no optimization, no 8 supplements, and a cold shower, and a 5 a.m. alarm. It was just there. You've watched older people, not very old, just a decade or two ahead of you, and wondered which version of aging you're tracking toward. The one who moves slowly, tires easily, whose world has contracted to a small radius of the familiar and manageable. Or the one who is inexplicably, almost offensively, still going, still curious, still engaged, still possessing an aliveness that has nothing to do with their age and everything to do with something you can't quite identify. The difference between those two versions of getting older isn't luck, genetics, or the right supplements. It's a set of specific structural habits, most of them invisible from the outside, none of them requiring a gym membership or a wellness program, that the longest-lived, most energized populations on Earth have been practicing quietly for generations. The most studied of those populations lives in Okinawa, Japan. Their longevity isn't a mystery, it's a daily practice, and the habits behind it are available to anyone who understands what they actually are. The Blue Zones Research, the large-scale demographic study of the world's longest-lived populations, identified Okinawa as one of 5 regions where people consistently live past 100 in good health, with energy levels and cognitive function that significantly exceed what Western medicine considers normal for their age. The researchers expected to find a special diet, a specific exercise regimen, a genetic advantage. What they found instead was a set of interlocking daily habits, social, dietary, physical, philosophical, that together created the conditions for long life and sustained energy almost as a side effect of being lived. No single habit explains the Okinawan longevity advantage. It is a system. Each habit supports the others. And the system, examined closely, turns out to be the same principle the channel returns to in every video, a daily structure that works with the body's biology rather than against it, at the scale not of a single meal or a single evening, but of an entire life. 8 habits. 8 structural adjustments to the conditions under which a life is lived. Not a wellness program, just a different way of inhabiting the years. Habit 1. Ikigai, the energy of having a reason. The single most documented factor in Okinawan longevity research isn't a food, a supplement, or an exercise habit. It's a concept so simple it sounds almost too obvious to take seriously until you look at the data. Ikigai, a reason to get up in the morning. Not a grand life purpose. Not a mission statement or a 5-year plan, just a genuine, specific, personal reason that tomorrow is worth getting up for. A garden that needs tending, a craft that is still being developed, a grandchild who is learning something new, a community that needs what you specifically can offer, a project that isn't finished yet. The research on Ikigai and longevity is substantial and consistent. People with a clear sense of Ikigai live longer, have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, maintain cognitive function further into later life, and report higher energy levels across every age group studied. The mechanism isn't mysterious. A person who has a reason to get up has, physiologically, a different hormonal environment than a person who doesn't. Purpose activates the same neurochemical systems as genuine engagement, which produces lower cortisol, better sleep, stronger immune function, and the specific kind of energy that sleep alone cannot generate. The Okinawan centenarians interviewed in the Blue Zones research were asked about their Ikigai without exception. Every single one of them had an immediate, specific answer. Not a philosophical reflection, a concrete, present-tense reason. This thing, happening now, is why tomorrow matters. The Western retirement model. The cessation of purposeful activity at a fixed age as a reward for decades of work is, from an Ikigai perspective, one of the most physiologically damaging transitions a person can make. The research on health outcomes following retirement is consistent and sobering. The removal of structured purpose, even when freely chosen and financially comfortable, produces measurable cognitive and physical decline at a rate that the most sedentary working life does not. The takeaway: identify your current Ikigai, not the grand one, the immediate, specific, present tense one. What is the thing that makes tomorrow genuinely worth getting up for, right now, in this season of your life? If the answer doesn't come immediately, that absence is more important information than any lab result your doctor could give you. Habit 2. Moai. The longevity of belonging. The second most documented factor in Okinawan longevity isn't dietary, it's social. Moai, the Okinawan tradition of a small, lifelong social support group, is one of the most specific structural explanations for the Okinawan longevity advantage, and it operates through mechanisms that Western social science has been documenting for decades without producing a cultural practice that reliably creates it. A moai is a group of 5 or 6 people, typically formed in childhood or early adulthood, who commit to mutual support across the entire lifespan. Financial support when needed, emotional support through difficulty, social accountability for habits and health. Genuine, unconditional presence across decades of shared life. Not a friendship group in the casual Western sense, a committed, structured, lifelong mutual support system that functions as a second family. The health research on social connection and longevity is among the most robust in medicine. Social isolation is as significant a risk factor for early death as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. The mechanism operates through the same cortisol and immune pathways as chronic stress. Loneliness is a physiological state, not merely an emotional one, and its effects on the body are measurable, consistent, and substantial. The moai provides the structural antidote, a guaranteed, consistent social connection that does not depend on individual initiative or circumstance, that continues through every season of life, including the seasons when initiating social connection is most difficult. The Okinawan centenarian who has been meeting with the same 4 people every week for 70 years is not accessing a special longevity food. They are accessing a social infrastructure that keeps the body's threat detection system from registering the isolation that modern life consistently produces. The takeaway: identify the 2 or 3 people in your life with whom you could build something resembling a moai, a consistent, committed, mutual support relationship that goes beyond casual friendship. Not a grand commitment, just a deliberate, recurring, genuine connection. Schedule it. Protect it. Treat it with the seriousness its health implications deserve. Habit 3. Nuchi Gusui. Food as medicine. Nuchi Gusui, an Okinawan phrase meaning food as medicine, is the dietary philosophy underlying the traditional Okinawan diet, and it operates through a principle so straightforward that it barely sounds like a principle. Eat food that does something for the body, not just to it. The traditional Okinawan diet is not a diet in the Western sense. It is not a set of rules, restrictions, or macronutrient targets. It is a cultural orientation toward food, as the primary vehicle through which the body receives what it needs to function well, which produces specific dietary choices, not through discipline, but through a fundamentally different relationship with what food is for. The specific foods that characterize the traditional Okinawan diet: purple sweet potato, bitter melon, tofu, seaweed, small amounts of fish, fermented foods, share a consistent profile: high in antioxidants and phytonutrients, low in caloric density, rich in fiber, and fermentable substrates for the gut microbiome. The Okinawan centenarian diet is not low in pleasure. Traditional Okinawan food is deeply flavorful and culturally beloved. It is low in the ultra-processed, caloric-dense, nutritionally empty foods that constitute the majority of modern Western caloric intake. The energy implications of this dietary pattern are specific and mechanistic. A gut microbiome fed on diverse plant fiber produces short-chain fatty acids that reduce systemic inflammation, support cognitive function, and generate the specific kind of cellular energy that ultra-processed food cannot. The tired all-the-time quality that has become the baseline for so many Western adults in their 40s and 50s is not primarily a sleep problem or a stress problem. It is, in substantial part, a gut microbiome problem, a chronic inflammatory state produced by a diet that feeds the pathogenic bacteria and starves the beneficial ones. The Nuchi Gusui reframe doesn't require adopting an Okinawan diet. It requires applying the Nuchi Gusui question to the food choices already being made. Does this food do something for the body, or does it merely satisfy a craving while adding to the inflammatory load that is producing the tired? The answer doesn't need to change every meal, it just needs to be honestly applied to a few of them. The takeaway: this week, apply the Nuchi Gusui question to one meal per day, not as a restriction, as a genuine inquiry. What does this food do for the body that needs it? Start there. Habit 4. Shizen. Move through life, not through the gym. The Okinawan centenarians studied in the Blue Zone's research do not, for the most part, exercise. They move. The distinction is significant. Exercise, in the Western sense of a scheduled, dedicated physical activity session performed in athletic clothing and logged on a device, is a compensatory response to a sedentary daily life. It is an attempt to recover, in a concentrated weekly dose, the movement that a walking-oriented, physically engaged daily life would distribute naturally across every waking hour. Shizen. Naturalness. The quality of movement that flows from the ordinary activities of a life, rather than from a fitness program, produces a movement profile that no gym regimen fully replicates, because it is distributed, varied, and embedded in meaningful daily context, rather than concentrated, repetitive, and contextually empty. The Okinawan centenarian who tends a garden every morning is not exercising. They are doing the thing they do every morning because the garden needs it and because they are the person who tends it. The movement is a side effect of purpose, which means it is accompanied by the neurochemical profile of purposeful engagement. Lower cortisol, higher dopamine, the specific energy that purposeful physical activity generates, rather than the cortisol spike of effortful exercise that requires willpower to initiate and maintain. The research on low-intensity, distributed, purpose-embedded movement and long-term health outcomes is substantial. It is more protective than concentrated high-intensity exercise for cardiovascular health, immune function, cognitive maintenance, and longevity. Not because intensity has no value, but because consistency across a lifetime and movement embedded in daily purpose is infinitely more consistent than gym attendance, accumulates advantages that any individual high-intensity session cannot match. The takeaway: identify one daily activity in your current life that involves genuine physical engagement, gardening, cooking, walking to things, manual tasks of any kind, and treat it with the same deliberateness and consistency as a gym session. Not because it replaces the gym, but because it activates the Shizen movement pattern that longevity research consistently identifies as more protective than the gym alone. Habit 5. Rest is not laziness, it's infrastructure. The concept of intentional empty space, applied to the longevity context, produces what is perhaps the most countercultural claim in this video. That deliberate, regular, genuine rest is not a luxury to be earned or a sign of insufficient productivity, but a physiological infrastructure requirement for long life and sustained energy. The Western relationship with rest is fundamentally adversarial. Rest is what happens when productivity has been exhausted, not what enables productivity to continue. The cultural ideal is maximum output from available time, with rest as the uncomfortable necessity that happens between output sessions rather than as a valued, protected, integral part of the daily and weekly structure. The Okinawan daily rhythm consistently includes deliberate rest periods, not sleep, but genuine stillness, the cultural equivalent of an afternoon's unhurried emptiness, that the Blue Zone's researchers initially struggled to categorize because they didn't fit either work or leisure as Western categories understand them. They are simply time that is not allocated to anything, held with as much intention as time that is. The physiological mechanism behind the longevity effects of deliberate rest is the same parasympathetic activation that the hero produces, the downshift from sympathetic stress response to the rest and digest system that allows the body to repair, consolidate, and restore at the cellular level. Chronic sympathetic activation, the state of low-level stress and high-level alertness that constitutes the default mode of modern Western productive life, produces chronic cortisol elevation, chronic inflammation, and the accelerated cellular aging that is the physiological correlate of the tired all-the-time experience that this video opened with. The Japanese centenarian who rests without guilt in the afternoon is not being unproductive. They are maintaining the biological infrastructure that will allow them to be productive and alive and energized for decades longer than the person who treats every available moment as a resource to be optimized. The takeaway: identify one daily window this week, even 15 minutes, that you will protect as deliberate, unscheduled, unoptimized rest. Not sleep, not passive consumption, just stillness. Treat it with the same non-negotiability as a work commitment. Notice what it does to the energy available in the hours that follow. Habit 6. Hara Hachi Bu, at the scale of a life. Hara Hachi Bu, eat to 80% full, has already appeared in this channel as a body health habit. At the scale of a longevity discussion, it reveals a deeper mechanism that goes beyond the daily caloric arithmetic. The consistent finding in longevity research across multiple blue zone populations, not just Okinawa, is that mild, chronic caloric restriction without malnutrition is one of the most robust interventions for extending healthy lifespan currently known. The mechanism operates at the cellular level. Mild caloric restriction activates a family of proteins called sirtuins, which regulate cellular repair, DNA maintenance, and the inflammatory pathways associated with aging. Animals given restricted but nutritionally complete diets consistently live longer, with better cognitive function and lower rates of age-related disease than animals fed to appetite. Hara Hachi Bu is not a caloric restriction diet. It is a habitual eating practice that produces mild caloric restriction as a natural side effect of stopping slightly before full, every meal, across a lifetime. The Okinawan centenarian who has practiced Hara Hachi Bu since childhood has, over 80 or 90 years, consumed meaningfully less total food than a person eating to fullness, without ever having experienced hunger, restriction, or the psychological cost of dieting. The cellular repair mechanisms activated by that mild, lifelong caloric moderation are part of what makes the Okinawan centenarians' cellular biology measurably younger than their chronological age. This is Hara Hachi Bu as a longevity practice rather than a body composition practice. Not a tool for how the body looks, but a practice for how long and how well the body continues to function. The 80% stop is not about restraint. It is about giving the body the space, every meal, to do the cellular maintenance work that eating past full consistently interrupts. The takeaway: practice Hara Hachi Bu, not as a diet, but as a lifetime habit. The 80% stop, every meal, not for what it does to the body this week, but for what it accumulates across the years. Start this meal. Habit 7. Kaizen at the scale of decades. Kaizen, continuous small improvement, applied to the longevity context, produces a principle that directly addresses one of the most consistent predictors of premature aging, the cessation of learning and growth. The neuroscience of cognitive aging is now well established. The brain maintains its plasticity, its ability to form new connections, adapt to new challenges, and repair existing pathways, as long as it is consistently challenged by genuine novelty and learning. The brain that stops learning does not simply stay the same. It begins the accelerated cellular aging process, the pruning of unused connections, the reduction in neuronal density, the cognitive decline that most people assume is an inevitable consequence of age, but is, in significant part, a consequence of cognitive disengagement. The Okinawan centenarian who is still learning, still developing a craft, still acquiring language, still engaging with genuinely new information and challenges, is not cognitively superior to their peers. They are cognitively maintained by the consistent application of Kaizen to their own mental life, the commitment, not to dramatic transformation, but to the continuous, small, daily practice of being slightly more capable tomorrow than today. This is what the aliveness of the old person who is inexplicably still going looks like from the inside. Not the absence of aging, but the consistent, deliberate choice to keep growing, in a craft, in a relationship, in an understanding of the world, that keeps the brain's maintenance systems engaged rather than allowing them to stand down. The takeaway: identify one area of genuine learning in your current life, a skill, a craft, a language, a domain of knowledge that you are actively developing rather than merely maintaining. If no such area exists, find one this week. The specific area matters far less than the fact of genuine ongoing development. Habit 8. Moai no Kokoro, the heart of community accountability. The final habit is the one that makes all the others sustainable, and it is the one that the individualistic framework of Western wellness most consistently fails to provide. Every longevity habit in this video, the Ikigai, the Nuchi Gusui, the Shizen movement, the deliberate rest, the Hara Hachi Bu, the Kaizen, requires consistency across decades to produce its full protective effect. And consistency across decades is not achievable through individual willpower, personal discipline, or the kind of motivated self-improvement that fills January gym memberships and empties them by March. It is achievable through community, specifically through the kind of gentle, consistent, non-judgmental social accountability that the Moai provides, and that the Japanese cultural concept of Hachi, a sense of social consideration, of not wanting to let down those who are watching, reinforces in every direction. The Okinawan centenarian who tends their garden every morning is not sustained across decades by personal discipline. They are sustained by the fact that the garden is part of a life that is embedded in a community that notices and values it, that the neighbor asks about the harvest, that the grandchildren expect the produce, that the practice has become part of who this person is in the eyes of people who matter to them. Habits embedded in community are exponentially more durable than habits held in isolation. This is not a motivational claim. It is a behavioral science finding, consistent across every domain studied. The Moai is not a support group. It is the social infrastructure that makes the other 7 habits sustainable across the timescale at which they actually produce their longevity effects. The takeaway: identify one person in your life who shares, or could share, one of the habits in this video. Not a formal commitment, just a natural, ongoing acknowledgement of the shared practice. The social embedding of a single habit changes its durability more than any amount of personal motivation. The tired that opened this video, the one that sleep doesn't fix, the one that waits patiently after the holiday, is not a mystery. It is the accumulated result of a daily structure that has been running slightly against the grain of what the body and mind require to sustain energy, repair themselves, and maintain the aliveness that makes tomorrow worth getting up for. The Okinawan centenarians sitting in their garden in the early morning, tending the plants that will feed the people they love, moving through the ordinary work of a purposeful day, eating food that does something for the body that needs it, resting without guilt when the afternoon arrives, belonging to a small group of people who have been present across the whole arc of their life. This person is not lucky. They are not genetically exceptional. They are the product of a daily structure that has been aligned, habit by small habit, with what the body and mind were designed to do across a long life. Ikigai, Moai, Nuchi Gusui, Shizen, Hara Hachibu, Kaizen, Moai no Kokoro. 8 habits, each one small, each one buildable into an already existing life without purchasing anything or becoming a different person. Together, across years and decades, they produce not just a longer life, but a different quality of life, one in which the energy doesn't dim, the curiosity doesn't contract, and the reason to get up tomorrow remains as present and specific as it was the morning before. The 100-year-old in Okinawa who is still going is not the exception. They are what happens when the daily structure is right. If this felt like something your life needed to hear, there's more waiting for you here.